Well, welcome back to our lessons on Solomon. So if you remember our last lesson, we started with the life of Solomon. We're going to be looking at Solomon and his wisdom, his wealth, and the women that surround him. So right now we want to put a little context on our lessons. So we're studying Solomon's life. We looked at his birth, his lineage. We looked at how he became king. And now we're going to start into his kingship, where he's going to get some messages, first from his father David, and then he's going to get some messages from God. So those are two important things we need to be aware of. If you remember, in our last lesson, we finished with 1 Kings and we finished the first chapter, whereby Solomon was king, and he's in the process of solidifying his reign in his kingdom. By the way, Solomon will reign also 40 years, just like his father David reigned 40 years. And during Solomon's 40 years as king, he will take Israel to probably the highest place that they have ever been as a nation, especially with respect to respect and wealth. So we start the lesson today in 1 Kings, the second chapter, and we'll start with the first verse. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. I'm about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Now you yourself know that Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me what he did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime, as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with them according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword, but now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do with him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. All right, let's stop there. So again, this tells the death of David. And so David dies, but in his last days, he tells Solomon some things, and he gives Solomon more information. You have to remember that this is a kingdom, and so Solomon, as king, has political rivals. He's got all kinds of rivals, and he's got things he's got to deal with. David is giving him some context. So he's giving him some information that he probably might not have had access to, and especially about people that David knows something about their hearts, and he knows something about what they have done during his reign. And so he pretty much clues him in, I want you to take care of some of these people. One of the major ones is Joab, the commander of his army. Even though Joab has helped David tremendously, Joab has done it with some conniving, and you see here in this series of verses, he's killed some of his fellow soldiers that were innocent, really, and during peacetime. There are some others that he tells Solomon to take care of, so to speak. Another thing that's interesting is David recognizes Solomon's wisdom, because he says, in your wisdom, you make the decision. And this is going to reverberate with us in many ways when we look at what wisdom really is. We'll dive a lot deeper into that when we go to Proverbs. But I want you to be thinking about what wisdom is. So when you look it up, a synonym for wisdom is discernment. So wisdom really relates to decision making and making wise decisions. And so that combines a knowledge base, but it also combines information. And recently, in the past couple of years, I kind of had an epiphany about information and knowledge. So if you combine all the knowledge, and you have perfect information, that translates into tremendous power. And in fact, that's really mankind. That's how we see God. We see God as all-knowing, all-knowledgeable, and He has perfect information over time and space and form. So He has perfect information over many, many time periods. He's got perfect information over space, over many geographies and planets and everything like that. And He's got all knowledge. Now, as human beings, we're continually trying to increase our knowledge base. We've done a pretty good job. But if you remember going back to Genesis in the beginning of the Bible, one of the problems we have as human beings is we always are looking for more knowledge, which is not a bad thing. But God tells us there are certain things that we need to be careful with. And He told that to Adam and Eve, and it's a lesson we always need to remember. One of the advantages that Solomon had was a superior knowledge base than almost everyone around him. So if we think of Absalom and Adonijah as good-looking and charismatic and those kinds of ways, what Solomon had was knowledge. And knowledge will usually outrun those other characteristics. So, when we first studied this lesson in our physical Sunday school class, we talked about maybe Solomon was like the nerd. He was kind of the studious person. He was, he wasn't the athletic and the charismatic son. He was the one in the room studying. He was the one thinking, collecting samples and looking at plants and studying animals and things like that. And so, but David recognizes his knowledge and his wisdom, and he says, okay, I'm going to give you this information, but I want you to take it, and you're going to have to make decisions using this information that I've given you, in particular about these particular people. So what's going to transpire next is Solomon's going to take care of business. He's going to do exactly what David has instructed him to do. So let's continue our reading. We're in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 13. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." Then he added, "I have something to say to you." "You may say it," she replied. "As you know," he said, "the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." "You may make it," she said. So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag, the Shunammite as my wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied. "I will speak to the king for you." When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at the right hand. "I have one small request to make of you," she said. "Do not refuse me." The king replied, "Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you." So she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David and has founded a dynasty for me as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Ananias, and he died. Let's stop there. This is a very kind of interesting story. So you've got Adonijah, who we know, we discussed in our last lesson, he had tried to usurp the kingdom from his father David. Bathsheba was involved, and Nathan, in reminding David that he had tapped Solomon as the future king. When Adonijah found out that David had put Solomon on the throne, he was very scared. He went to Solomon and kind of asked for his life, and Solomon told him, "If you behave, you can live." But then he's kind of brash here, and we've got to remember who Abishag is. You remember when we first started 1 Kings, there was this story about David was old and he was cold. So his attendants said what? He needs a young woman to keep him warm. And it says they never had sexual relations. It was simply a relationship, okay? And so we also know that she was beautiful. So, but she was in the king's court. She knew much about what was going on in the royal house, so to speak. So I think Bathsheba sees this request as, okay, good. I'm going to get rid of Abishag. She's here. She was with David. Remember, David has many wives. Bathsheba's one of his wives. And anything she can do to get rid of one of these other women, I think in her mind is a good thing. Solomon, though, on the other hand, saw this as a power grab. Saw this as a connection between King David and Adonijah. And so he was very upset. And though he told his mother he would grant her request, he did not grant her request. And in fact, it upset him to the extent that he had Benaiah, who's going to do this several times, go straight to Adonijah and slay him. Let's continue. Verse 26. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships." So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord, and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, go strike him down. So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.' But he answered, 'No, I will die here.' Benaiah reported to the king, 'This is how Joab answered me.' Then the king commanded Benaiah, 'Do as he says. Strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword. Both of them, Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. But on David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever.' So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home out in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position, and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, 'Build yourself a house in Jerusalem, and live there. But do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your head.' Shimei answered the king, 'What you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king has said.' And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maachah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, 'Your slaves are in Gath.' At this, he saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, 'Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you? On the day you leave to go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die. At that time you said to me, "What you say is good, I will obey." Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you?' The king also said to Shimei, 'You know in my heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever.' Then the king gave the order to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down and he died. The kingdom was now well established in Solomon's hands." All right, so now we have Solomon, who has kind of taken care of business with Benaiah. Benaiah is his kind of henchman, so to speak. But he's done what David has told him. So he's got new priests. He's got Zadok now as the priest, who Zadok stuck with Solomon when Adonijah tried to take the throne. He's had Joab slain, and he's replaced him with Benaiah. Shimei, he had been told to beware of him, so he put a conditional request to him. He said, "Okay, you can go over here and stay, but don't leave the country. If you leave the country, you will die." He didn't obey Solomon, so Solomon had him put to death. Now at this point, you've got to remember that Solomon and the people now see Solomon as he can do the dirty work. He not only can, he's not only smart, he's not only got the knowledge and information, he can also make very difficult decisions with respect to his competitors and his enemies. And so at the last verse, at the end of verse 46, we see the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. There are no threats internally to Solomon's reign now. So what we see here is Solomon now is going to consolidate the kingdoms, and he's now going to start a building process. He's going to do three things, and these are the three main components of our study. He's going to continue to increase in wisdom, and he's going to now start using that wisdom in many ways, and he's going to become famous around the known world there, around them, for his wisdom. The second thing he's going to do is he's going to start amassing wealth. And he's going to do that mainly by trading with other nations around him. And we're going to see that he's going to create alliances with the richest nations around him and with the most resource plentiful nations around him, because he's going to need lots of resources to build the temple and his palaces, and he's going to rebuild cities in Israel and Judah and the kingdom. The third thing he's going to do is, and this is his biggest mistake, the third thing he's going to do is he's going to intermarry. He's going to, with the alliances that he creates outside the kingdom, he's going to seal those alliances with marriages to daughters within those kingdoms, especially the rulers of those other kingdoms. So we're going to continue our discussion of Solomon, but let's go ahead and start chapter 3. We probably won't get that far. We only have a few minutes left, but we're going to go ahead and start chapter 3, and you'll see, we'll start to see how he creates these alliances. Chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering judgment, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands, as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his courts. This is where Solomon really was wise. He realized his weakness, he realized what he needed, and he asked the Lord, he asked God for it. And this greatly pleased God. God is going to appear 2 times to Solomon. This is the first. He's going to appear in the first time, and he's going to grant him this great request that he's asked for. And this is really what Solomon is known for, and it shows a great amount of maturity at his young age. He says, I'm but a little child. We don't know exactly how old he is, but he's young. And so this was very a wise request, and the Lord, we know, was well pleased with him. And he's going to be well pleased. Remember in our first lesson when we talked about Solomon's birth, one of the sentences there that we read was, the Lord loved him. So the Lord has always loved Solomon from the day he was born. So we now are up to the point where Solomon has asked for an extra pound of wisdom. God is not only going to give him a pound, he's going to give him a ton of wisdom. And so the next lesson we have, we'll see where that wisdom comes into play, and it's probably one of the most famous wisdom decisions that we have seen, and it's often referred to as splitting the baby. Join us for our next lesson. Look forward to seeing you the next time we meet. Thank you very much.